there would not have been any Guadalcanal campaign if it wasn't for this guy that I'm getting ready to talk about. His name is Admiral Ernest King. He is the commander-in-chief of United States fleets in the Pacific. And King did believe in a Germany first approach. A lot of people, especially like Australians and British counterparts, believe that King did not like that idea. And in all actuality, he did believe in a Germany first approach. But King, unlike most people, especially this early in the war, one is uber aggressive, right? If you were going to compare him to like a Civil War general, he's Stonewall Jackson, right? He's uber aggressive,
all right,
all the way on that side of the scale.
Yeah.
And King believed that because of the American industrial might, it would allow us to fight simultaneously in both theaters. We could focus primarily on the European theater and fighting Germany, but he did believe that we would have enough assets and the ability to create more of those assets as time went on, that we could operate simultaneously in both theaters, which he correctly believed that.
Yes, yeah.
Admiral King also believed that, after this victory at Midway, he didn't think that we should let the Japanese have a chance to catch their breath. Don't let them regroup. Don't let them get back on the offensive.
Yeah. They're
on the back foot. Let's keep them there. Which, Monday morning quarterbacking this, he was absolutely right.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Once you get the enemy moving backwards, you don't ever give up the initiative. You want to keep the initiative.
Momentum shifts everything.
King wanted to strike the Japanese quickly, but he knew he had to convince a lot of higher ups that he should be allowed to do this operation. So he came up with this idea of taking over the Solomon Islands and then pushing up to the main Japanese base in that area at Rabaul. And he was going to do that with an entirely Navy and Marine Corps force, so no Army assets whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
That's how he was going to justify, not taking things away from the European theater. He was only going to use assets that were already over in the Pacific.
Makes sense.
He also knew that one of the things kind of in his favor is that by keeping the Japanese occupied in the South and Southwest Pacific, that it would keep them off the backs of the Russians. And the Russians now for a long time have been pleading with the rest of the Allies to do something, right? We need help here.
Yep.
And we definitely can't take a two-front war. Like, we've got enough to deal with Germany right now. And they really did. I mean, if you look at the casualty numbers for all the nations involved in World War II, Russia, hands down, sacrifices the most lives, right?
Yeah.
They by a lot. I mean, if you combine all of the other Allied forces together, Russia still outweighs them.
They got blitzed really hard.
I think I saw a statistic the other day that it was something like 25 million people.
Yeah.
Like 20 million civilians, or maybe it was 27 million. 20 million civilians and 7 million armed forces, which is unbelievable to think about. That is so many people, dude. That's so many. It's just
and the population back then was even way less compared to what it is today. So
it's crazy to think about.
Very horrendous.
Now, as I said, King wants to invade the Solomon Islands. There's a few bases there that he's trying to. The idea is he's trying to gather enough bases and enough supply points and also airfields that he can set up a very strong offensive against Rabaul, because Rabaul is very well defended. It's the primary base in the Pacific Theater.
Mm.
The Japanese had a heavy presence in the Solomon Islands. They had bases at Tulagi, Gavutu, Tanambogo, and a new airfield that's being constructed on the island of Guadalcanal, which the Americans just find this out. I mean, this is very fresh information. Now, all of these bases could be used by the Japanese to threaten supply lines between the U.S. and Australia, as well as launching points for future offensives in the region. Because, again, you have to remember the Japanese are on Papua New Guinea, on that northwestern side of Papua New Guinea. All they have to do is capture Port Moresby, and Australia is kaput, as the Germans would say, right? They're out of luck.
So they do it a little bit further out in the Solomon Islands now.
Right. We're going to push them back a little further. We got to get them out of those places so they can't utilize those bases.
Yeah.
There's politics in the military now. There was politics in the military back then. Mm-hmm. Probably more so back then, because you had some huge egos going on, operating at very high levels of the military back then. The one I'm primarily going to be focused on today is General MacArthur, Douglas MacArthur. Now, he's just been pushed out of the Philippines. He's given command of the Southwest Pacific area of operations, and Admiral King and the Navy are in charge of the South Pacific area, which butts up right up next to it. And that border kind of crosses through the middle of the Solomon Islands.
Okay.
MacArthur wants to be in charge of the operation to take Rabaul. And Admiral King wants to be in charge of the Navy, at least, to be in charge of the operation to take Rabaul in the Solomon Islands.
I can see this now.
So they battle back and forth. MacArthur has his plan he comes up with and submits it to the chiefs of staff. King submits his plan to the chiefs of staff. And eventually, I could go into a lot more detail on this, but it would be taken away from the rest of the story. So just needless to say, eventually, King wins. And really the deciding factor of that is the way MacArthur wanted to attack Rabaul left U.S. aircraft carriers vulnerable to land-based aircraft from Rabaul, right? Because we wouldn't have any land-based aircraft to attack Rabaul. It would all be aircraft carrier-borne aircraft. And knowing he was right, MacArthur finally agrees, okay, we do need to take the Solomon Islands.
Yeah.
They go back and forth a little bit more because MacArthur still wants to be in charge, but eventually King wins out, and King is only going to use naval assets, so Marine Corps and Navy ships. Eventually, the Army does come into play, but initially, these initial attacks, it's going to be just the Marine Corps. So that leads us to the creation of Operation Watchtower. Now, Operation Watchtower is a 3-phase operation that Admiral King comes up with. The first phase is to seize the islands of Tulagi and Guadalcanal. Guadalcanal has an airstrip. Tulagi also is the way its harbor is there. It's very good for like water-based aircraft. You know, like the what's the one we always talk about?
Catalina.
The Catalina. Yep, PBY Catalinas. Once that's seized, phase 2 is seize the rest of the Solomon Islands. After that, we move on to phase 3, which is attacking Rabaul, the primary Japanese military base in that region. Succeeding at this will be a heavy blow to the Japanese and will push them back quite a long distance in this area of the Pacific.
Yeah.
Now, all that to be said, Admiral King knows, like I had mentioned earlier, he doesn't want the Japanese to get back on the offensive. He wants to hit them quick while they're still reeling from their loss at Midway. So speed is the key. Well, speed is also a disadvantage when you take into account how big of an operation this is and all the moving parts. I have a quote here from the United States Marine Corps official history, and it has this to say about Operation Watchtower.
All right.
Quote, "Seldom has an operation begun under more disadvantageous circumstances," end quote. And that couldn't be farther from the truth.
Yeah.
Or that couldn't not be farther from the truth.
Yeah. They said, forget it. We're going live. This one, shotgun.
Yeah, you talk about winging it. That's practically what happened.
Yeah.
The time frame from giving the order that we're going to do this operation to launching the full-on operation. That's all the moving parts, all the ships, all the aircraft, all the ground forces, all the supplies and logistics, ammo, food, you name everything, and rehearsal is a very short time window. It's something like 6 weeks. It's very short.
Yeah, it's not much.
So because of that, there's going to be some poorly handled processes. And the first one is going to be deficient intelligence. Marines and eventually the Army that would participate in this battle would conduct the entire operation without a map of Guadalcanal.
That's unreal.
I can't even fathom that. I mean, you base everything off the map, right? You want to patrol this area. This is where I'm going to go. This is where we saw the Japanese, and you're constantly using the map for everything. It's how commanders get, that's how they locate advantageous pieces of terrain, right? Is off of a map. They don't have one. They'll do the whole operation without it. There's going to be disorderly planning as well. So everyone, because this is happening so fast, everyone is planning this operation simultaneously at all levels. So that means that the command staff, the highest level you can operate in, generals and admirals, they're planning while simultaneously the guys at the lowest levels are planning, right? So squad leaders and platoon leaders and company commanders, everybody's planning at the same time, which means no one can plan off the other, right?
Right.
Everybody's making a plan that might or might not work because you don't know what anybody else is doing.
Everybody's perception is different too. Like, oh my gosh, that's something else, man.
Could you imagine, dude? There is a rehearsal for this operation, but it's a failure. The location is nothing like Guadalcanal, and all the troops are green, so that the way they operate is just not up to par. When you think I equate this to we would do rehearsals for raids for high value targets. We would make tape houses. We've talked about this before.
Dry runs and stuff,
dude. For one house, if you're going in for a high value target, so a very small operation, right? You're not talking about a whole island and an airfield and all,
Right.
You name it. For one house, you would rehearse that for a week at least, every day, multiple times a day, if not more. You would have everything in that op down to the specifics. This guy's lining up here. This guy has grenades. This guy's going to throw the grenades. This guy's doing this, X, Y, Z.
Yep.
This is how we're marking the rooms. This is, everything is planned out. This is our CASEVAC plan. This is where our casualty collection point. This is our secondary casualty collection point. You have it all figured out.
A lot to it, man.
Right? These guys did one rehearsal. It was a flop. They never did it again. They just got back on the ships and started steaming towards the Solomons. Probably the biggest disaster is going to be how logistics and supplies are handled. So the troops sent to Guadalcanal are fresh out of training. They're armed with bolt-action M1903 Springfields, and they're only given a 10-day supply of ammunition. Now,
Jeez.
I have to weigh in on this because I would go outside the wire for one patrol with at least a 10-day supply of ammunition. I'd be carrying so much ammo, it would be stupid. Because you never want to run out of ammunition. I can't think of a worse feeling on a battlefield than going dry on ammunition, right?
Yeah, and there's no way that this is going to take 10 days. Nothing takes 10 days.
No, but it's so early in the war.
Yeah.
MacArthur, his whole plan for taking Rabaul, he said he was going to do it in 17 days. Just completely detached from reality. You know what I mean? Expectations far outweighed the capabilities.
Yeah. Overconfident.
I have to tell you, if you are in the military or if you're getting into the military, know your limitations and set your expectations accordingly. That's why units like Delta Force plan their own operations, because if it's left to someone else, they get in their head that these guys are superhuman. They're they're capable of achieving things that are just not possible,
Right.
So you have to have realistic expectations. But unfortunately, the planners of this operation did not. The operation planners also reduced the supplies of food from 90 days to only 60 days. The men of the 1st Marine Division began referring to the coming battle as Operation Shoestring, because that's what they were hanging on by.
Hanging on by a
shoestring.
That's a perfect evaluation right there.
All in all, the Operation Watchtower force is going to number 75 warships and transport ships. That's going to be vessels from the U.S. and Australia, along with the 1st Marine Division.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this clip from America Fog of War, catch the rest of the episode here.